Guys, what's going on? Welcome back to a brand new review for Loki episode 3. Of course, this will be in full spoiler detail, and man oh man, again, what a great episode this one was. A little bit slower pace than we were from the last couple of weeks, but again with excellent script writing, one fantastic one-shot take action scene, or at least it was edited to look like that, and some really good character development between the two Lokis. This ends up being a very solid episode and one that I very much enjoyed, and I can't wait to hear your guys' thoughts as well, because that's the best part about doing this and being crazy and reviewing this and waiting up until midnight to watch this new episode, because I love looking at the comments, seeing your guys' theories, your thoughts, seeing where we disagree and agree, and that's where it comes down for you guys. So make sure to comment down below and let me know your guys' thoughts on the show so far. What did you guys think about episode 3? And as well, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you are a geek like me, because this is truly the channel for you. So of course, Loki episode 3, again, a really good episode. Now, I think this is probably the weakest out of the 3 so far. When it comes down to pacing and reveals that kind of go about, there really much was only one big reveal where it came down to the TVA and kind of everything that's going about, but it ends in such a cliffhanger that kind of lets us go, how are our characters going to get out of this? And we will kind of discuss that in just a bit. Of course, this episode picks up right after last week's episode. It's been a bit since it's been 3 weeks since I've seen the first 2 episodes, so I finally am getting a new episode since Disney sent me the first few episodes early, and now having to wait this long and actually getting to see where this other Lady Loki, or even some people might be thinking that she might even be the Enchantress, which I'd be kind of down for. Sophia, who is portraying her, does such a fantastic job with, of course, her charisma, building this character, and in general, making her own version of Loki. And that's something that I really like about this, because while, again, we are very much attached to Tom Hiddleston's version of Loki, we love that character to death. We've been around that character for so long now, and now seeing a new interpretation, at least that's what we're meant to believe it right now. I'm gonna go with that she's Lady Loki until we hear more about it. Maybe she really is the Enchantress. Maybe this is their way of segueing her into the MCU. I do not know, but I'm liking what they're doing with this character. And I think it's a very interesting dynamic there. And again, opening up, she's going through the TVA, kicking ass, great stuff in there. And of course, Renslayer comes in to stop them. Loki transports them to another apocalyptic timeline, which is on a planet that a moon is about to crash into. And it's just absolute chaos. And it's up to them to charge this little temp pad so that way they can get out on time. But of course, knowing how Loki's may be, not everything's going to go out that way. And very much this is a journey across this. Now, one thing that I've really much noticed about the show is the scope of it so far is bigger than any of the Marvel shows in Phase 4 yes far. Now, WandaVision, my personal favorite so far, and I loved WandaVision to death. For me, again, the scope was very much more smaller, more emotional, and I like that. I like that these two shows so far, and including now Loki, especially after this week's episode, has really much dove into the more emotional side. We get more quiet moments that I feel like when it comes down to the Marvel films, we don't get too many of. We get some, but not enough. In these, they can really take the time with the characters, but at the same time furthering the story. While, again, there can be some pacing issues within WandaVision of trying to figure out, okay, like, when are we going to finally get answers? And then when it comes down to Falcon and Winter Soldier, okay, let's kind of move the story along a bit. Loki, for me, kind of has had that nice, solid pacing where it's like, okay, for every question you're going to have, we're going to give a little bit more of answers to, but at the same time, we're still going to lay down some questions. And in this one, while it doesn't progress the story too far along, what it did for me was it progressed these two characters along. And again, this is a kind of a character piece episode that I feel like we did need, because for the most part, while these Lokis are pretty much bickering the entire time, and it is very entertaining to see these two Lokis bicker the entire time, because again, it's two versions of Loki, and that's why we come to the show. And when you look at the title of Loki, it's not just about Loki, it's about Lokis, and of course the TVA. Now, in general, even though they escape from the TVA in that point, them kind of just learning about each other and seeing how their different of lives really much come to play, and how Lady Loki, you know, for instance, once they get on the train and everything of that nature, Lady Loki didn't have a mother like Loki did. And, it's really fascinating to me how, like, Thor the Dark World is regarded as, like, the worst Marvel film, but there's so much emotional beats in there that really much reflect on the character of Loki, and the way that the themes from that movie are so strong, and it's crazy to me because it's the one movie that I do not care to revisit, but its themes still remain such a powerful and intact, whether it's an Endgame and now even the way that it affects this variant of Loki. And for me, I love that. And just having that little dialogue with him on the train, just discussing it, was very fascinating. And I found some emotional core stuff in there that I wasn't expecting from this episode at all, but I really got to do that. And even though, again, there's still kind of this mystery surrounding this version of Loki that we met last week, played by Sophia again, it's very interesting to see, and going to be interesting to see where she ends up going, because she's becoming a very fascinating character. And I think in the end of the day, last week I saw some people complaining that, why are they doing her as the villain, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if she's the core villain. And I think that's the thing, is we don't really know who the villain of this entire show is yet. It could be the TVA, it could be the Timekeepers, it could be a variant of unknown that we don't know about yet. I have my theories, and we'll talk about them just towards the end of this episode, where I want to hear your guys' theories down below. But that's something that I'm really digging about this, because it's just a very interesting show with a massive scope, a massive idea that in the same way could be very convoluted and confusing, but it really is not. And I think a lot of that has to go down to the script writing. I cannot infuse enough how well done the show is well written in that, and rounded out in such a nice way. Now, again, I do think this episode could have been a little bit faster paced when it comes down to there, while, again, it doesn't move the story too far along. Once, Loki does screw it up, and when they're on the train, he messes up, they get thrown out, and of course he breaks the Tempest. But they come out with a new idea. We can hijack the ship and get away, since it never actually made it off the planet. Good idea, right? Let's mess up this timeline a little bit more. But walking around there, and walking through there, became something really interesting for me in here, because the big takeaway from this all is when she says they're all variants, which Loki goes, that's not what I understood. The Timekeepers told me, or the TVA told me, that the Timekeepers created all of them for this. No, they're variants of themselves, which from different worlds or timelines and stuff like that, which now makes a lot of sense and a lot of confusing stuff. And that, how is that going to play? Who's Owen Wilson's variant in, the MCU? Who's this one? Who's that one? And that's, I feel like, going to be a really core piece that's really going to play into the next 3 episodes. Because right now we are in the middle of the show. This ended up on a cliffhanger, which, of course, let's just jump over to that. They finally get to the station and becomes an all-out run to the ship. And I gotta say this, phenomenal pacing within this moment. Not even pacing, just the way that they shot it and actually edited it into looking like a one-take shot. I could tell where some of the cuts were, but still really engaging, really infusing, and I love the cinematography in this moment. But, of course, the defeat really comes when they get to the ship and it blows up from the moon. And from there, they're just sitting there in utter defeat. She walks off, Loki just looks baffled, and the show ends. And I'm like, damn it. And I'm like, going through the credits, I'm like, okay, is there an after credit scene? Is there an after credit scene? Maybe I missed one. I was still scrolling through, couldn't find one. Maybe you found one. But now we have to wait a whole another week for this. And I think that's where it just goes. We end on a cliffhanger. How are they going to get off this planet? Who's going to save them? How can they save themselves? And where is this possibly going to take us? But now where this leads us is why this show is being such a fascinating watch and just a week-to-week must-watch. And that's what I'm really digging about it. Maybe you disagree, and that's okay. That's where we can kind of comment down below in the discussions. I'm still waiting for Kang to show up. I think Kang is one of the Timekeepers. I really much can't wait. And maybe that won't happen, but that's kind of my theory. That's who I think is actually the main villain of this, and I think he's infiltrated or betrayed the TVA itself, or at least the other Timekeepers per se, and I'm interested to see where that might go. There's a lot of unknown variables in here. We didn't see Owen Wilson's Mobius in here. We didn't see any of the other main TVA besides Renslayer. And again, it's just going to be a very fascinating watch to see where that all goes. I am really liking that Sophia's Loki character so far. Again, there's some unknown variables to her. We don't know too much, but I think just having those small, subtle discussions between the characters was really important. Some good action, some great dialogue, and just the massive scope that we see here was great. I overall enjoyed this episode. It's not my favorite one, probably my least favorite out of all the Lokis, also the shortest out of all the Loki episodes, but I'm really interested to see where they take it next week, because we're still waiting to see where Richard E. Grant is in here. He's casted in the show. We know he's somewhere in here. I'm still calling that he's playing another variant of Loki, but we will find out very soon, guys. So make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, comment down below your guys' theories. Thank you so much again for clicking on this, and of course, I hope if you're crazy as me to stay up late, then you're awesome, and if you didn't, and you're just getting your rest and checking this out later in the day, well, thank you so much. So of course, until next time, stay classy.